from all around the world today. It's really great to see so many people engaging in this webinar. Just to introduce myself, I'm Dan Foreman from Swansea University. I'll be the chair of this first webinar run by the British Ecological Society this year. And the subject of this particular webinar is how to plan your career from a PhD onwards. And I'm very, very pleased and very, very grateful for the contributors today. We have a wealth of experience to hear from today, and I'd ask you to use the chat function box if you can, if you have any particular questions you wish any of the contributors to answer, and we can have a general discussion and provide as much advice as we can for you all to try and ensure that you benefit from the experience of all the contributors to ensure that you have a very successful and effective career in the field of ecology. So thank you very much indeed. I'd like to introduce the three contributors today. We have Karen Devine from the British Ecological Society, who is a careers advisor. She's waving at everyone there. I hope you can all see her there. We're also very grateful to have Catherine Drayson from Policy Exchange. She'll be providing a perspective of where you go after you've got your PhD. And finally, but not least, we've got Lydia Bach from Queen's University in Belfast in Ireland, who's offering the perspective of a current PhD student and what she's up to in order to try and maximise her opportunities while she's undertaking and pursuing her PhD. So many thanks to everyone, and I'll kick off now and hand over now to Karen Devine, who will give us our first talk. So in your own time, Karen, I'll keep an eye on the clock for you.
Okay, thanks very much, Dan. So hello to everybody who's listening. My name is Karen Devine. I'm the External Affairs Manager for the British Ecological Society. A significant amount of the work that we do is actually in supporting careers for PhD students and early career scientists, and much of this presentation that you're going to see is really culled from years of speaking to various students, early career scientists and senior scientists about how they got to where they are. And hopefully throughout it you'll find that there's lots of links to following through to next steps that you can take after today's session. But please do at any stage come back and ask me any questions. So in terms of kicking off then, hopefully you can all see a PowerPoint presentation, hopefully. And one of the things that I want to start off with is really just pointing you to two papers that are useful to read. So there are two career theories about how we go through our lives and plan our careers. One is called the DOTS model, and in that one you have this step and you will follow this step by your next step, and you know exactly what that next step will be, and your life will be nice and smooth and perfect, and in 5 years' time you'll have the absolute career that you dreamed of. The next paper is a bit more useful. So the next paper is Harnessing Chance. The reality for most of us is that I've never yet met anybody who went 1, 2, 3, 4 and arrived at their final career. Everybody I know who tells me what their career path has been does so with opportunities that they made the most of, experiences that changed the way they thought about where they wanted to go, meeting people they hadn't met before who inspired them to do different things. And that's quite an important step to take. So they're useful papers to read, but what I would encourage everyone who decides to read them is that a combination of the two is a great way forward. It's about having that pathway in your mind, but making the most of the opportunities that come along as you go through the next few years of your life. So if we're moving on to the next slide, we're really looking at from PhD to postdoc. And in this instance, I've called it PhD to postdoc in or out of academia. And these are the top tips that came up from all the various people I polled. I know most of you are PhD students, and if you're wanting to stay in research and to follow a postdoc, then you have two main pathways open to you, either inside or outside of academia. But what you do to get there is very similar. So regardless of your next steps, it's really about choosing the institutes you might want to work with. Now in the UK, that could be places like the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, could be the James Hutton Institute. It could be in places like Nepal, it's actually working with the government on particular projects. No matter where in the world you are, there are opportunities out there. But the critical thing is the point underneath that. And the point underneath that is that most researchers don't work in isolation. So most of these supervisors that you have now will already have those networks out into those other institutes if you're wanting to work outside of academia, and certainly if you're wanting to work inside academia. It's quite important now to build an international presence. We can already see, just from those people who've responded, students from all over the world who are doing PhDs not in their home country. And I think having an international presence is quite important. It isn't that hard to do, especially if you work through learning societies. You can think about projects that will allow you to increase your presence on an international stage. And social media is a great way to build those presence. Okay. The other thing to really think of is impact skills. So particularly now, if it's research in the UK, being able to show you understand the impact agenda, understand how your research can be used, can be communicated, that's quite an important skill to be developing. And as a PhD student, you're in a great position to start developing those skills. So if you're not doing that now, it is a critical skill that you need to be developing. For those of you who want to stay in academia, then getting some practice with teaching is quite valuable. It's less so if you're going out of academia, which is why it's in red text. And then finally, the last point on this is that learner societies, no matter where in the world you are, there are learner societies in your host country. They are great ways to network with the wider community. They won't just be academics, they'll be professionals and practitioners across a whole range of different career pathways. You really should consider joining a learner society, and I'm going to say it hundreds of times. You should join a learner society, and whichever learner society you join, you should also be active in that learner society, and I'll talk a little bit more about that further on. So if we move on, you don't actually want to do a postdoc, you don't want to stay in academia. Where do you go after that? Now the great thing is regardless of the route you want to take after your PhD, PhDs are great training, and for the majority of things that you do during your PhD, you're gaining skills which are easily transferred and translated into alternative career paths. Now I've just highlighted on this slide a really broad brush categorization of the other careers that are available to you. So there is consultancy on a national and international scale, working for the government, the statutory sector, whether you want to work for the commercial sector or you want to work in the NGOs. Again, there's conservation, which is great for national and international opportunities, for the statutory sector, for the NGO sector. Science communication is a huge, broad remit, and I haven't actually written down within there that science communication includes education, public engagement, informal mechanisms, paid and voluntary mechanisms. But the great thing about science communication is you should all and could all be doing something now to gain those skills. And I've pulled out of that one section in particular policy, because policy is such a huge sector, and I know that Catherine will probably talk about it, so I'm not going to say a great deal about it, other than it was worth pulling out as a separate section. We're kind of looking at a bit more detail. In terms of consultancy, for those of you not really sure of what this might be, it is the biggest growth area in terms of employment. Comparative to the other sectors, it's amongst the highest paid. It's not the highest paid, but it's amongst the highest paid. PhDs generally have not been required. However, I would say that increasingly they are. And that one of the reasons they're required is usually more to do with a lack of ID skills. And this is critical. ID skills for consultancy genuinely matter more than you might think. And if I speak to various employers, I'm increasingly being told that they're delivering practical interviews tests as part of their recruitment processes, simply because lots of people will say they can ID grasses, invertebrates, and they can't. So interview stage, they're increasingly delivering practical tests. Now, as a PhD student, this is a great time to upskill yourself. And as a PhD student, through Learner Society memberships, you're able to access reduced rate training in those specialist skills that perhaps you didn't pick up in your undergraduate master's studies and might not be picking up in your PhD. So as a student, now is the time to really be focusing on those ID skills. One of the warnings that kind of comes with consultancy is that you're usually working within the commercial sector, within the business sector. If you've been employed by a great big company to deliver an environmental impact assessment, then they're going to have a preferred outcome, and you really need to think about how you're going to manage those sorts of skills. Okay. The best website to have a look at if you want a broad brush understanding of what consultancy is SIEM, and you should have this as a little blue hyperlinked note so that you can go direct to it, but just in case, it's SIEM.net in case you can't access that one. Okay. The other sector that I pulled out that I thought was useful in terms of science communication, where PhDs are really popular now, is publishing. So I pulled this out particularly because it's reasonably well paid. As a PhD or as a postdoc, you can access roles as editors. It is a very desk-based job, it's a very computer-based job, but you do get to attend lots of great scientific meetings. The job, generally, is peer review, creation of journals and podcasts, social media, video and training. The thing you need to be doing now for this is really thinking about evidence that you can write, and that you can write well and people are interested in reading. So a lot of our editors spend a lot of time reading, but also communicating researchers' papers to a wider public. And I thought it was useful to let you know that the BES has 5 academic journals that are very well regarded. When I joined the society 10 years ago, only one person really had a PhD. Now, when we recruit to new editors' roles, they've nearly always got PhDs. It is an important qualification to have for publishing. If you're interested, then through social media, you really should be looking at the various journal Twitter feeds, and I'll talk about those a little bit more later. More generally, with science communication, it's very broad, but it is very easy to upskill during a PhD. So Lydia, who's going to talk later, has done quite a lot of work with us on science communication through a number of different projects. It's very disparate. You can be involved in working with very big organisations all the way down to very, very small organisations. But the great thing about it is most universities in the UK, increasingly overseas, will have a public engagement staff. And it's easy then to go and have a chat with them about various opportunities that you might want to get involved in. A good guide to what science communication should look like is an organisation called Science Made Simple. They're great because they'll help train you up. Okay. And then finally, finally on this section, on to conservation. It's one of the lowest growth sectors. PhDs are quite often used and needed. It's often badly paid, badly resourced, seasonal. People do it because they love it, because conservation matters to them. If you're interested in this sector, then education again is important. Your ability to communicate and enthuse other people about why a particular environment needs to be conserved is important, and gaining skills in those sections is quite useful. Again, it's a great opportunity as a PhD student. There are fantastic opportunities to engage with projects. You do usually need a driving licence. It does hinder people if they don't have a driving licence, weirdly enough. The great thing for those of you who want to continue on and actually maintain an academic profile is that you can still publish. And I think for all these careers that I've talked about, the main thing about them is that many people don't just have one career in one sector. There are conservationists who do consultancy. There are academics who do conservation, education, public engagement work. So you can mix and blend to create the career format that you would prefer to have. So how do you upskill? Now, as a careers advisor, I'm more often likely to see a CV which is blank, with people asking me what they can do to fill it in. And when they're in the early stage of their career, that's great. When they're actually out there looking for a job, it's a bit more of a challenge. So this is kind of the things you should be doing now. So the first one is join a learner society. Be active in a learner society. So you should be joining several, particularly because they offer access to grants you can't get as a non-member. But critically, be active in one. So Lydia, for example, sits on the chair of our education committee. We have PhD students on our meetings committee, on our membership committee. we have a whole battalion of PhD students who help out with mentoring undergraduates. The whole point of using those PhD students is partly because they deliver quite a lot for us, but hopefully what they get back is training in committee work, training in financial arrangements, in event planning and management. And that's all stuff that learning societies can help deliver in terms of training, which is not necessarily always available in the PhD. The final thing is training courses. You need to be attending as many as you can. And the other thing that I'd add into this is developing your own project. So I'm often stunned by meeting somebody who will give me their CV, and then when I've spoken to them, I've realised that they're running their own little side business through which they manage a business, they manage the finances, and they've not thought to write that down. If you can't find opportunities, the best thing to do is to create your own opportunities, and that will help you certainly with project management. If you're upskilled, the next thing is getting connected. So my pet passion in life is Twitter. You need a professional account, I would say, and the reason why you need a professional account, if you're planning your career, is really about how you build bridges. Organisations like the BES and ESA are great kind of introductory careers feeds that you should be thinking of following. We will promote and advertise next steps opportunities, training opportunities, projects you can engage in. And that's an easy way to keep tabs of what opportunities are out there that you can stay in touch with. But actually it's also useful for identifying those jobs. So the UN careers I put in because 2 weeks ago a student from India asked me if I knew what jobs might be available in India with the UN. And I said, well, I have no idea. But I do know that I can go to a Twitter feed and see what's happening, and that's where it becomes very useful. It's very strong in the UK and America, but I would also say that having been in Sweden 2 weeks ago, it is becoming much more dominant in the European sector as well. So you do need to be aware of it, you do need to be following Twitter. So apart from those that I've mentioned, Postdoc Jobs is a great Twitter feed to follow. If you have a particular area of research you're interested in, then you need to be following the research group. And if there's a particular organisation like the UN you want to follow, then you need to be following theirs. Your Twitter account should be professional. It shouldn't be personal at all. I'm more than happy to provide advice, and there's lots of advice out there for people wanting to gain more experience with Twitter. But I would certainly say the 3 messages you should take home today are that you need to be a member of a learning society, you need a professional presence on social media, and the final bit is you need to be mentored. And I would say that mentoring is something that people overlook. They think it's something that you do only if you feel you're struggling, but I would also say that some of the most senior ecologists I know have mentors, and they have them to get to the highest levels of their professional career. They are a great way to help you make your next step. It shouldn't be departmental. If your career path is outside of academia, it almost certainly should be someone within the career sector you think you're interested in, and it should be somebody who can help you identify how you are going to get to where you need to be, not somebody who's going to tell you what they did to get to where they need to be. As a last note of advice on this sector, then formal schemes are great. They offer training and support. We run one as the BES. Most universities will run some, but they're not essential. So if you can't find a formal scheme, all you really need to do is to seek out somebody you think may be interested in sitting down and having a cup of coffee with you and talking through your options. They can be short term for a week, they can be long term for up to 6 months. It isn't a lifelong relationship, it's a periodical relationship. And then that brings me on to my final slide, since I'm near the end of my time. This is obviously just a quick summary. In terms of careers planning from an advisor's perspective, you need to be visible. Nobody's going to give you a job because you exist. You need to be connecting with people. The easiest way to do that is through your learning societies, postdoctoral associations. You need to be getting out there and raising your profile at conferences. And in terms of what you can do now, make sure you are developing your ID skills, filling any skills gaps you have, attend as many summer schools as you can afford to. The one that I was in Sweden was free for the students. It cost them nothing to go. Actually be writing your CV, keeping it up to date. Get yourself a mentor and make as much use as you can of all the career programs that are available to you. That's it. That's my last slide.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Karen, and many thanks for keeping to the time as well. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask Karen, please do use the chat function in the webinar to pose your questions, and we will raise them with the various contributors at the end of everyone's presentation. So thank you once again, Karen. Our next speaker is Catherine Drayson from Policy Exchange. So I very much hope that we might be able to see her. I understand we might not be able to see her, but hopefully we'll be able to hear her as well. So in your own time, if you'd like to start your presentation, Catherine, you'd be very welcome. Thank you. I'm afraid we can't hear you at the moment, Catherine. If you can try again, that would be brilliant. Apologies, everyone. I think we have what we've known as a technical gremlin going on in our webinar at the moment. We'll try and resume contact with Catherine in due course if we can.
Hello?
Hi.
Who else is there? Hi. If the other people want to press audio and video, that worked for me. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Karen. Hi.
Okay. Hello. Hopefully that's worked.
Where's Dan?
I'm.
Hi.
I am. I'm not sure anyone else can hear us at the moment. Some people do have video and audio at the moment. I'm just waiting to see if you can kickstart your presentation. See if Samina can get that going. Okay.
Mine?
Oh, brilliant. We now have all three. Yep. Okay. Everyone's happy. Catherine, can you say hello just to see if people can hear you at all?
Yeah. Well, audio test. Can people hear me okay?
Yep. Audio test, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Can anyone let us know if you can hear? Brilliant. Okay. Right. Okay. Can I suggest that we continue with yes, if that's okay. Sorry about that, Lydia, to raise your adrenaline levels there. If we can return now to Catherine,
Right.
I believe we've restored normal communication. So thank you for everyone's patience. It's always joyful running these webinars on an international framework. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, brilliant.
Okay, so hopefully people heard about my more or less random career path. I'll just go back to that slide so people can see, starting off with a biological sciences degree, ecological consulting, a PhD, then joining a centre-right think tank, and next month I'll be starting as a civil servant with the Greater London Authority in the environment team. So in terms of why I left academia in the first place, well, I hope that's a bit of a recap from the chat. People didn't hear anything that I said, which is a bit of a shame. But the reason I left academia is because of a bit of a bubble. I could see through my PhD that the environment wasn't being protected the way it should be. And there wasn't really any way I could see for my voice to be heard as a lowly PhD student or even a postdoc. It's quite rare in general for academics to be powerful enough to change things in policy and legislation. So the other issue is that I am not by nature the kind of person who delves into things very, very deeply for the rest of my life. I very much enjoy making connections between different sectors, working interdisciplinarily, and a career in academia probably wasn't going to allow me to continue to do that. So I decided to go into policy instead, which has been incredibly influential. Managed to get some policy wins already, which has been education. Oh, video's back. Can you still hear me? Hopefully.
Yeah, you're dropping in and out, Catherine, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Oh no. Okay. All right. In which case, I'll move on a bit. One of the main things I found very helpful to me was teaching myself GIS skills. This is Geographic Information System skills, mapping skills. And I've used that to great effect where I currently work. It's enabled me to work across lots of different sectors, helping out, trying to find out ways of presenting information in a more user-friendly format. So in line with what Karen was saying, it's really important to set up your skills, figure out what it is that you're interested in and what you're good at, and work on those. Okay. And then I was also asked to look at, or to talk about self-reflection and skills assessment. And this is not easy. It's a really difficult thing to do well. Most people don't know themselves inside out. So what I would say is ask yourself questions, but also ask other people questions. Lots and lots and lots of questions and lots of different people. They'll all give you different answers, and that's fine. You just pick and choose what seems most sensible and most applicable to you. So things like, what's important to me? Is it job location? Is it job satisfaction? Is it income? What is it that I'm good, not so good at, or okay at? In which case, should you focus on the things that you do really well? Maybe work on a few of the things that you're okay at and ignore the things you're not good at, or do you focus on things you're not good at if they're particularly useful for the career you want? That kind of thing. How can you get good or better at these skills? What careers will allow you to use the skills that you enjoy the most? And what do you need to have on your CV to get you there? So I would ask Twitter, honestly. People answer random questions on Twitter all the time. This is no different. Ask your friends, ask your family, ask former PhD students who are a year or two ahead of you, perhaps. Ask your supervisor. But also, I would say, actually read the news. There are so many careers out there that careers advisors and people have no idea about. If I'd gone to my university careers service saying I'm interested in think tanks, they wouldn't have had a clue. So do read the news. There's lots of careers advice and lots of ideas out there. But there are also lots of free services. So your university careers service, the people may not necessarily be all that knowledgeable about your particular area, but they should be able to point you in the direction of resources that might be able to help. And there's also a resource called nationalcareerservice.direct.gov.uk, and I'll send the hyperlink through to that, and it gives general CV and cover letter advice, that kind of thing. So, one of the major problems with applying for jobs is that they all seem to require 3 to 5 years worth of experience. And it's a perennial problem, because how on earth are you supposed to get those 3 to 5 years experience if you never get given that chance in the first place? So what I would say to you is actually your PhD is.
If you could just repeat the last few sentences there, Catherine, I think you might have dropped out again. Thank you. Okay, I think we may have lost audio from Catherine again, I'm afraid, everyone. We'll just give her one more opportunity to see if she can come back in. And failing that, we'll move on to Lydia Bach's presentation.
Okay, fingers crossed that's working again.
Yeah, I
being
can
able
hear
to
you,
gain
Catherine, so thank you.
Great. Your PhD is 3 to 5 years worth of experience. You've got a lot of transferable skills: project and time management, data analysis, critical thinking, communication in terms of writing and presentations, and independent work. All of these are crucial for any new job. But it's not enough. You have to do other things as well as your PhD. Whether it's volunteering, teaching yourself new skills like being able to use GIS software, attending seminars and lectures, and networking. Networking is absolutely critical. The other thing
I think your connection has broken up again, Catherine, I'm afraid.
I think it has. Okay, and back again. So PhD is the most flexible time of your life. You will never have the opportunity to do quite so much outside of your working day as you do when you're a PhD student, because your hours are relatively flexible, more or less, depending on your work. So you can do internships, you can do, ow, that hurt. You can do work experience. And you know, this is absolutely critical. I ended up doing 2 weeks worth of work experience at a law firm.
Hi, Catherine. I'm afraid you're breaking up quite a lot, and it's becoming quite garbled, I'm afraid. So if we can ask you just to repeat that, that would be really useful. Thank you. No, I'm afraid I think we might have lost you permanently there, Catherine. I think. I think what's the best thing to do now, if that's okay, is for Lydia to give her presentation and see if we can make any gains in the audio that might be there, if that's okay. I'm not sure if you can even hear me now, Catherine, in saying this.
So I'm Lydia. I'm a final year PhD student, and I should be done by this time next year. So I suppose I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I'm trying to develop my CV, focus on organizing my PhD in a way that I finish in time, but also what I'm hoping to do afterwards and how I'm preparing for that. I don't actually have a presentation. So I suppose to me, preparing for what comes after the PhD started when my PhD started. So what I'm trying to do is personally become more part of the research community, that is the community I work within, but also the larger community, so ecology. And I've been doing that through, you know, being part of societies like the British Ecological Society, but also being part of, you know, committees within societies. And that's really helped me to, you know, not just gain an insight of what's going on, but also make connections, chat to, you know, people in the area, but also to be more aware of funding opportunities and grants and what's required for them. I think it's just really great because it gives me a much better idea of how I can use the society to my advantage and how I can get more exposure. I'm also involved in some of the, you know, more local scale career planning. So, or what's going on at a local scale within my university. So I've joined the Athena Swan committee as well, just because it gives me a good insight of what's happening, but it also helps me to represent postgraduates, chat to postgraduates, and see what's, you know, out there and what the challenges are in academia. And I think that's really good because then if you're networking, you're also in the mind of people. And I think that's really, really useful when it comes to applying for jobs or references later on. I've also been lucky because I've had a fair good amount of experience in writing funding applications and organizing conferences. And I think that these are all skills that I can use in the future in any kind of job that show that I can project manage, plan, and also obtain money. What I'm also doing, and what's really important to me, is to not just focus on academia while doing the PhD, but also to really follow what the other kind of things I'm passionate about. So I'm really excited about scientific engagement and outreach. And the British Ecological Society and, for example, Society of Biology have a lot of grants that can enable you to do work or support you. So it's great way of getting involved with a society, but also a great way of developing your own project that you're excited about out of your PhD, but somehow related. So for example, I have an outreach grant from the British Ecological Society that gets artists and scientists together to talk about climate change and create artworks relating to climate change. So it's something I'm really interested in, but I think it's also something that I can use to argue that I have project management skills, I have leadership skills, and I can develop my own projects and take them forward. In terms of my PhD work, what really, I think, helped me, fingers crossed, were project management courses that were offered by university, in particular defining my scope and revisiting my Gantt chart and timescales, and have a clear line of communication with my PhD supervisor, because I think that managing a PhD and managing the time during the PhD is something that's a huge challenge. And I think things are going well, but I think that looking back at it, I wish I would have planned more thoroughly right at the beginning of my PhD. And what do I want to do after my PhD? Well, at the moment, I'm thinking I would quite like to stay in academia, but I feel that what I'm doing during PhD gives me the transferable skills that should allow me to also work in other jobs. So, for example, if I would want to have a job in science communication or outreach, I think that I have some of the skills gained during my PhD. What I think was really useful for me was to keep my networks that I have open and continue communicating, even leaving my undergraduate university and going to another university. I would make sure that I keep chatting to staff members or to people who I work with, because I want to make sure that they know what I'm doing and they let me know if there are opportunities out there. So the options for me, if I stayed in academia, were to either apply for a postdoctoral position or to write myself in a grant. And I think what I realized quite recently is that I have about 10 to 12 months left, is that if I want to write myself in a grant, that's what I got to do right now. So I don't want to end up finishing the PhD and have a panic about what's going to happen later. But so that's what I'm kind of currently working towards. So I suppose if I was kind of summarizing it, to me, it's really important that I further my personal development, and that will automatically result in me gaining the skills that I need for the jobs that I would like to do in the future. So that's why during the PhD, I do loads of different things and get involved in loads of different areas that can help me understand what I like, but it can also give me skills that are either directly transferable or that are transferable because I learned some key management skills or leadership skills. And I think networking is incredibly important, but it comes with working on your own personal development. So start the PhD working on your own personal development, and then work on it with a fairly clear focus, I think, as you're ending your PhD, would be a tip from me. And that's my experience, I suppose.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lydia, for that insightful perspective. It's very important we understand how you're addressing the challenges of trying to proceed with a career during the process of undertaking a PhD, which is, should we say, quite challenging in terms of the management of time and effort that you might have. So I think you've provided a really unique and very interesting perspective for us here. I'm just going to see if we can bring in Catherine again. I think she may have had to leave to go to another meeting as well. So it may be that we'll not be able to pull in that particular talk for all the attendees at the moment. So if you can just bear with us whilst we just try to reconcile that. But again, if I can ask you all, if you have any questions that you wish to ask Lydia or Karen or indeed myself at all about how to get ahead and plan your career and what types of things to consider, please do. I've jotted down a few ideas already, so we'll have the opportunity to have a bit of a chat towards the end of the presentation. So thank you very much so far, and thank you for that lovely presentation, Lydia. Well, I think whilst we're waiting to see if Catherine can come back in, she is. I've just seen a message pop up for her. She's here to answer questions, but not sure if anyone can see or hear her. So we'll try and include her. I mean, my suggestion. Oh, sorry. Are you there, Catherine?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
Can we have anyone else out there that can hear Catherine, the elusive Catherine?
Oh,
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Okay,
Brilliant.
great.
Thank you, Fritz. Brilliant. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Emily. That's brilliant. Perhaps if we can return now, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing the rest of your presentation now, Catherine. Thank you very much for spending the extra time with us today.
That's
We
all
do
right.
appreciate it.
Not a
Thank you.
problem. So I'll be as quick as I can in case it cuts me off again. But the most important thing about internships and work experience during your PhD, as far as I was concerned when I did mine, was that it helped me figure out what I didn't want to do, as much as it helped me figure out what I did want to do. So I didn't end up wanting to do environmental law as a result of doing 2 weeks in a law firm. I didn't want to work for a member of parliament because I did 3 months part-time working for a member of the European Parliament answering casework, which was probably the most depressing 3 months I've ever spent. That was done part-time during my write-up. So it is possible to do all this even while you're writing up. You just need good time management, and that in itself looks great on your CV. The other thing is, even if you don't necessarily like the internships and work experience that you do, just the process of applying for them and going through the interview processes is really useful for the future. So it's great practice. And then the final slide on the home stretch, the key take-home message, or two key take-home messages is, number one, do lots of stuff outside your PhD. Just figure out what it is that is important to you and do it. And the second thing is networking. Karen touched on this earlier, but it's absolutely critical. Twitter's a great one, and so I put up a few hashtags that are worth following that are relevant for PhD students, but also blogging. Just write about even just day-to-day life. What is life like as a PhD student is really interesting, and so you can get that on the Eco Bloggers network to widen out your audience for a start and help build up your profile that way. It's free to join. Just send them an email with your blog link. Also join academia.edu and ResearchGate. While you've got a university email address, this is absolutely crucial because you won't be able to join afterwards, or are very unlikely to be able to, and it does give you access to all the researchers internationally who are also on those networks, and there are thousands of them. Start talking to them, start following people who are interested in your areas, and the great thing with both of them is that you can end up, once you leave academia, being able to ask those people for journal articles that you no longer have access to once you've left university. So it can be quite a useful resource that way as well. LinkedIn is also very, very helpful. It's the Facebook of the professional world. You can also put on your blog posts on LinkedIn. And what's interesting with that is that you end up reaching a completely different audience. So that's great too. And even Facebook actually can be really useful because, let's be honest, a lot of your friends will be fellow PhD students. So follow what they do in future life, even if not, you won't necessarily stay in touch with them every day. It's a good way of keeping tabs on people and figuring out, oh, well, so-and-so ended up getting a really interesting job. Maybe this is something I'd consider doing later on. And then you get in touch that way. So I've had requests from former university colleagues who I barely spoke to in the lecture hall via LinkedIn and Facebook, asking me what life is like as a consultant, what life is like in a think tank. So they are really valuable resources. So networking, doing lots of work experience, and upskilling, the three main things. And I think that's it.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Catherine, for hanging around, and I'm pleased to see that the audio and visual issues have been resolved to a certain extent. So thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions so far, and obviously we'll start up some questions here, but wanted to give to all three contributors here. A question was raised quite early on about the particular demanding thing of unpaid internships. Are they a good idea? Do you recommend people take that route, or should they be looking for paid employment? Is there a balance of credibility for a paid versus unpaid internships? What are your views, please?
I'll start with Lydia, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's helped me quite a lot. In particular, during my undergraduate and my still I'm doing quite a few things that are unpaid internship because I think they give you the experience necessary to then say you have the experience necessary to get an actual paid position. But I do think that there are also quite a few internships out there that are advertising unpaid positions that should be paid. And I think it's a fine line to walk, in particular in ecology, because everyone wants experience and everyone's willing to do a lot of things for getting experience. So I think that's a personal choice, but at the beginning, it's probably the best option is to do unpaid internships. But I think there's a line that comes later that you need to decide about.
No, I think
I would
very
concur
wise
with that.
words there.
Yeah, I would agree. In
yes,
an
absolutely.
ideal world. Sorry, Catherine?
No, up to you.
I would say in an ideal world, you wouldn't do an unpaid internship, but unfortunately, ecology is a sector that has a very, very long history of voluntary unpaid work. I think I wouldn't presume that you should always do unpaid work. I think that the landscape has changed. It's increasingly challenged for people to offer unpaid internships. And they need to be very clear about what they're giving you if it's an internship as well, that the law is very clear in terms of employment about what unpaid internships look like. So you should make sure you understand your rights if you're going for unpaid internships. And I would be cheeky and say, well, then there needs to be some training, there needs to be a skill. The payback is something that means something to you as an individual if it's not financial.
Very wise words there, Karen. So, Catherine, do you have any views on this?
Yes, there is a distinction between work experience and internships in law. Generally, work experience tends to be for a much shorter period of time, and it's easier to get away with unpaid work experience for that. And in some ways, that allows you to get far more breadth of experience, which can be useful if you really have no idea what it is that you want to do. An internship, however, again, in an ideal world, would never be unpaid. However, I was offered an unpaid internship that offered travel expenses that I turned down in favour of working for an MEP for 3 months, which was paid part-time. It's a balancing act. It very much depends on your personal circumstances and just how attractive the opportunity is and how useful it will be in the route that you want to take.
No, thank you very much for your views there. If any of the attendees have any comments or feedback about anything that's been said here, please do put it in the chat function. I'll just raise a question here. So Lydia and Catherine, how did you manage your PhD alongside all these other things you were doing? It sounds like you were doing a tremendous load of different things. How did you balance the time? What sort of skills did you have to develop? Did you have any mistakes that you had to learn through and process through in order to develop your skills in this area?
Who would you like to answer that first?
Lydia, if I could refer the question to yourself first, if that's possible.
I'm not really entirely sure how I'm managing things alongside. I suppose I'm trying to incorporate the activities I'm doing, and I'm trying to manage my time in a way that I'm not wasting time. So I have a very strict schedule of what I'm doing when. And I have a very strict management plan and to-do list for every single week. And I have a very strict Gantt chart that tells me exactly what I have to do. And the PhD work is top priority. So if I don't follow that on the Gantt chart, other things have to, have to be less intensely done. But then the things I do, I'm trying to get other people involved. So in the case of the art science project, then I would just step back from the leadership role and ask someone else to fill that in if it would be too much. But I'll also be honest, I think I do more than the 8-hour days. The work-life balance is necessarily as it should be.
No, it's very clear that academia does have a significant challenge with getting this work-life balance. As an academic myself, it's not unusual to do 12-hour days and things like that, is it? And that's a personal choice that people perhaps have to
Yes.
be prepared to do. You have to go beyond the call of duty sometimes and recognize that others may not recognize that you're going beyond the call of duty and just expect to see that as the norm. But Catherine, do you have any views at all on this particular issue as well? How did you get that
Yes.
balance right? Because you were doing a tremendous lot as well.
Yes, and it's not easy. But one of the things that my mother always told me was it's much easier to do things if you tell yourself that you want to do them rather than that you have to. And I saw all of the extracurricular things that I was doing as things that I wanted to do. So for me, actually, geeky though it sounds, they were fun. So a lot of the environmental law lectures that I was going to partly because it was useful for my PhD, but also partly because I was interested. I wanted to find out more. So I deliberately, I narrowed down what it is that, the things that I did to be the things that were relevant and important to me, rather than trying to do everything at once. What I also developed, I didn't go quite as far as a Gantt chart, although that's a good tip. Unfortunately for me, things tend to change on a very regular basis. So I think I'd probably end up spending more time updating my Gantt chart than I would just following it. But I did end up using a lot of productivity software. So things like Workflowy, which is online note-taking and flowchart software, that kind of stuff. And that really helps keeping on top of the to-do lists. To-do lists are brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think there were some very, very useful insights provided there. There's been a couple of questions that are coming up here, and I'll deal with one of the first ones here. There's a lot of emphasis on using social network and things like that. People are pressed for time. Which of the social networks that have been described by the contributors today, do you think, if you only had to pick two, which ones would you focus on, and perhaps why? So if I can address that to Catherine first.
Yeah, that would be Twitter and ResearchGate, I think.
Okay.
ResearchGate, because of the access to researchers, and for me what's been crucial is access to papers that I can't access because I no longer have journal article access. And Twitter, because it keeps me on top of the latest news, which is really important in my current job, and also helps me connect with a whole raft of people outside of academia who are also interested in ecology and conservation.
Brilliant. So you heard it there, Twitter and ResearchGate. Lydia, do you agree? Do you think there are any other options or combinations of this social media that we could engage with that will provide the best opportunities, limiting the amount of time that we have to spend on this, given that we'll be doing lots of other different roles as well?
I think a LinkedIn profile isn't too much work and doesn't take too much time updating. And it's a great opportunity for you to just network and get in touch with, the former lecturers, professors, students, and just a very easy way also to be endorsed for the particular skills you have. And I think, updating that every once in a while, that doesn't actually require very much time.
No, thank you. That's brilliant. Someone has raised the challenge of getting teaching experience, particularly in some EU countries. It's not possible to actually do any teaching unless you actually have the prerequisite of a PhD, which is the stumbling block here, the horse and cart scenario. Do the contributors have any advice as to alternative routes to try and seek teaching experience or activities which are commensurate with teaching at all that people could engage in, such as tutoring, demonstrating, those sorts of things? If I could ask Lydia first.
I think there was a point made in the chat just now that there's also a lot of opportunities in a less formal setting, like a public engagement or outreach event. And I think people are always looking for organizers or a helping hand during those events. So even if it's something that's teaching a different sort of audience, it's good experience to have, but also it's fairly easy to get.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a very, very wise thing, and I suggest that learned societies are also a really good vehicle for that, and gaining that access and having that backing by other academics as well to give you the confidence to do some of this public engagement and things which are effectively teaching, communicating effectively. That's really, really good. Catherine, do you agree? Do you have any other points of view to present to us?
Yeah, I mean, at least in the UK, things like bio blitzes and citizen science projects are a really useful way. They're always looking for people to help educate the public in identifying species and help with the organising of these events. So that's one way in. Also, I did a 6-week project, Operation Wallacea, in Honduras after my undergraduate degree. And for that, I was teaching sixth form students, so 18-year-olds, how to trap insects and collect them, and teaching them about the basics of ecology. So structured programs like that can also be quite useful.
Brilliant. No, that's wise advice as well. So it's about seeking maybe alternative opportunities to look at what teaching skills are actually required and delivering them and finding ways to get those practice and experience under your belt in different ways if you can. A question to raise to the contributors as well. A lot of jobs require quite a lot of administrational responsibility. How do you get administrational responsibility? You often see it on job adverts as essential or desirable criteria. So admin, how can you demonstrate on your CV that you've got administrational support? If you could provide any support on that, I'd be grateful. So perhaps first, Lydia.
I like that I'm always the first one here. I think doing a PhD gives you a lot of admin skills in the first place. You're more likely to actually do a lot of your own organization and paperwork than your PhD supervisor will. But I also think then the positive thing of doing internships would be to gain these skills. So any sort of project that you've managed and you had to do the admin for, or any sort of leadership roles you had, will then come useful to do that. And I think it's just the case of, I think that doing a PhD or a similar large scale project is going to give you a lot of these skills. You just need to kind of look what specific skills they're looking for and then just think about when you actually acquired them, because I think you'll probably already have them, you just can't think of it as such.
So it's about recognizing what you're already doing. I think we often don't see the wood for the trees, to use an ecological phrase there. We often are engaged in administrational duties without recognizing it. So it's going back to basics and maybe getting some advice from a mentor as to how you proceed. Do you agree, Catherine and Karen, at all? Do you think that's a sensible way forward?
I think it is a very sensible way forward. I think that PhDs have a huge number of transferable skills, and a lot of the experience that you need has already been gained because you've had to do that. I think if you need to build on that, then particularly administrative skills, that's where membership of different societies comes in, that active membership where you're saying you're actively involved in their projects, their activities. You can do that at a national level with big societies. You can do that in your own institution with your own groupings, where you can lead the way in really developing meetings and groups that have administrative roles and responsibilities.
Brilliant, thank you. What about yourself, Catherine? Do you agree with the comments from Lydia and Karen?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the main things I'm finding employers really like is the ability to use Excel. It's amazing how many people don't know how to use a spreadsheet. So something as basic as that is critical. Also, how to use formatting in Word. Something as simple as being able to create numbered lists and formatting titles and creating contents pages and bibliographies, etc. Things that you take for granted at PhD level and that are basic, really. Many people just don't have a clue how to do. So yeah, you're already on a very strong ground.
And I'd like to thank Emily and various other contributors who've been engaging in a conversation online to support individuals and explain opportunities as well. I'm very grateful. We already have a really effective community communicating here and trying to help each other, so I'm very, very grateful. We're nearly running out of questions here, but one I'd like to pose to the contributors here is about personal value sets as well, because when we talk about careers, we often assume that we have to go in a specific direction, and what we don't often talk about are the softer skills within humanity, i.e. what we believe in, where our strengths and allegiances lie. Do you have any views on values and how you need to understand your value sets in order to find the most effective career path for you, and indeed a job that you can be happy in? And that's what we would really like to aspire to. So perhaps if I can start off with Karen, if that's okay.
The research on this is that people have different allegiances to their personal values. So there are people out there who will have a very strong set of personal values for which they don't need to engage their professional lives at all. And that's quite easy. I think it's understanding how important your personal values are to your professional life. For me personally, mine are very important. There is no point in me looking for a job that's well paid that isn't something I can believe in or get passionate about because, well, my faith shows that, well, I'm just not passionate about it. So I think you do need to know that about yourself. I suspect most PhD students are similar, simply for the reason that to do a PhD, you have to really want to do it. They don't just happen because you get up and work a 9-to-5 day. So I think you need to know that about yourself, and you need to spend some time reflecting on whether or not your personal values are important to your professional life. But if they're not, don't worry about it unnecessarily. That's just your personal choice.
Thank you, Karen. Catherine, do you have any views on this at all, or do you have no view on this?
I have difficult views on this. So, well, I work for a policy think tank, and by definition, you end up getting sort of caught up in politics, which of course is a whole set of different value systems, however much you might try and avoid it. So if you do want to go down the policy route, you do need to think very carefully about what your priorities are. Are you more on the left of the spectrum? Are you more on the right? Are you more in the centre, centre left, centre right? There are so many different nuances in this, and a lot of it actually you only gain through trying and through experience. So I work for a centre think tank, which is quite unusual for someone who's been in academia, which is traditionally associated with being left-wing, and also with someone who's interested in the environment, which is green and also traditionally associated with being left-wing. So it's been actually quite uncomfortable at times, but really fascinating. So yeah, just explore things. If it goes wrong, you can always move.
Wise words there. Lydia, do you feel that your values are aligned with where you want to go in life and the career plans that you're putting into place? Have you considered your values and where you're going at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think I feel that choosing to work in this particular area is really in line with what I value and what I would like to do as a person in the world. I think having my values influence my career choices has advantages because I'm going to be, passionate about it and I'm going to follow one direction. But I also think that sometimes, an ecology career choice is a very challenging career choice. So I can see how being a little bit more flexible would be quite advantageous as well. At the same time, I think because of the values I have and also because of the interests that sort of interplay, I think that makes me really quite flexible within ecology or within the area that I work in, because personally I'm interested in understanding how ecosystems function and what the relationship is between biodiversity and ecosystem functioning. So to me, I can work on any system and the question would still be interesting. So I think it's good to have values and not to be too restrictive. So yeah,
thank you for those points. It's much appreciated. A question has been put up by Fritz. How do the panel or the contributors feel about emailing people who you don't actually meet, but you think you might be able to work with them and develop grant ideas and proposals? If I can refer to Catherine first on that one, please.
I think generally people are very responsive if you just ask them for a coffee and a catch up. Most people love talking about themselves, myself included. And I'm more than happy to dispense words of wisdom and pearls of advice. When it comes to an unsolicited email asking for a grant, I'm not sure that's necessarily the way forward. I would develop a personal relationship first, and then see where it goes.
Do you agree, Karen?
I do. I think particularly people that you might want to work with in terms of grants are busy people with very full email inboxes. And I think you're far better positioned to build that relationship. See if you can get someone to mediate and make an introduction first if it's somebody that who is likely to have never heard of you. That way then their email is more likely to get a response. But I would support Catherine's suggestion that you're better off going for a coffee and talking about collaborative opportunities before you talk to them about a grant.
Lydia, do you agree? Have you had any experience of this during your period of candidature and your PhD so far?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with the both. I think it's really important not to just send out random emails. I think academic staff get a lot of random suggestions that are not necessarily entirely relevant. So I think really planning out how to make contact and really utilizing the networks that you may have. And even if you don't have, then suggesting a coffee or a Skype, I think it's better than just marching in on the proposal.
No, and thank you. And obviously, attending conferences, seminars, joining learning societies provide those opportunities really for you to actually meet these people that you aspire to work with as well. And so they're great places to go to actually meet some of these people and start to get to know them before you start planning ahead. So hopefully that's answered your question there, Fritz. It's looking as though we're nearly at the end of the questions. I'd like to thank once again all of our contributors today and everyone for attending this webinar. I hope you found it interestingly. I will round up with the top tips that have been provided by our contributors today. So you need to improve your career prospects, and one of the useful ways to do this is to identify and fill your skills gaps, and actually this is quite a challenging thing and requires quite a lot of time and effort to do. Keep your CV up to date and get a mentor, someone who can provide that objective, outside of the box perspective on where you are and where you might like to go. Work experience and internships are actually very, very important at you demonstrating a set of skills and competencies and the ability to perform under sometimes quite challenging positions and circumstances. They're very useful, not just to find out what you're interested in, but the point has been made very well, I feel, is that it's to allow you to work out what you're not enjoying and don't want to do. So see it as a positive experience. Even if you're not enjoying it, there's something positive that you can take from this. And I think that's very wise words indeed. Take time to explore career options during your PhD. If those of you that are out there that are engaged in PhDs, don't wait until you've completed your PhD to work out where you're going to go. That's the death knell for many a career. Early on in the first, second year, try to talk with your supervisors, get some careers guidance, see how you can move forward with your career plans. And indeed, as Lydia has correctly said, if you want to apply for a grant to continue work after your PhD, you really need to be thinking about it in the second year of your PhD. So you have to think about time management, who you're going to apply for. Do you have the support of your department, your faculty, whatever it might be, to do that as well? So make sure you look at that. And the final point which is raised is to network. We're in a global community now. We have huge, tremendous advances in the ability to communicate with one another. And really, we need to tap into those networks. Many jobs are not going to be advertised. And if they are advertised, they're sometimes advertised internally within institutions as well. So your best bet really is to stay connected with everyone. Really, write a blog, get onto LinkedIn, ResearchGate, and communicate with people. Put your skills and your knowledge out there for everyone to tap into. And who knows what might actually occur. So thank you very much, everyone. That's brilliant. I'd like to sort of just close up to say that there will be another couple of seminars that the British Ecological Society are running. The next one, which might be of relevance to everyone in this particular webinar today, is on the 13th of November, and it's relating to how to get published. This is the bread and butter metric at the moment for science, if you want to get ahead in the career, it's very important you have a very strong publication track record, ideally, in a subtle hint for you all, in open access journals if possible. Engage with society who helps fund the research that we undertake. Give that information back, and that would be a very strong recommendation if I can. So thank you very much indeed. Apologies for the technical problems we have, and I'm very grateful for everyone's patience. So take care, everyone. Good luck with your careers, and maybe one day we'll come across one another in a British Ecological Society conference. I very much hope so. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Thanks.